Ford Galaxy 2-liter TDCi. This video will show you how to replace real brake pads and discs, also known as rotors. Before we do anything, as you noticed, we took off the wheel, then open the bonnet. That's your brake fluid reservoir, brake fluid tank. Put some tissues underneath because it may leak. You open this cup just to let the air out as we're going to push the piston in. And now we're going to change brake pads and discs. First we're going to undo these two 13mm bolts. They are not too tight. Once they start spinning, as you can see, this nut can spin as well, so you can counter hold with 15mm spanner. And take it out. So this is all loose. This is how it happens. We're turning the bolt and this nut is turning, so what we're doing, we counter hold with 15mm spanner. Technically we want to take this bolt out completely, even though if we push it out as much as we can, we still can remove caliper. But what we want to do is replace this bolt. New is always good. So in order to do that, I can remove this. You don't have to do it, up to you, but I prefer to make it perfect. So we're gonna lift this handbrake lever and then mind your fingers, please. Take this cable out of here, and then take some pliers, squeeze these plastics so you can push this cable out. Now with this cable loose, you can take this nut out, and then take a screwdriver or small pry bar and remove the caliper. Ideally, what you want to do is not to apply pressure on the brake lines, so it doesn't hold weight of the caliper on the brake line, but there are so many cables that are holding it, we can just simply rest it here on the suspension and just deal with the brake pads. So then we take these brake pads out. They're not too bad, but disc is worn out quite a lot, so we're gonna replace the discs. You simply take the pads out. Springs, they normally come with the new pads as well. And then what I like about this car, you don't have to remove this bracket to take the disc out. In some cases, if you can't take your disc out, in some cars, there are two big bolts on the other side. These two bolts, they are pretty tight, they hold the bracket. So if you can't remove the disc, remove the bracket first and then remove disc. Sometimes with a bit of rust, disc can be stuck, so you give it a few taps with the hammer. In our case, it's all moving freely, and as you can see, we can take it out through the bracket without removing the bracket. Then we can clean the remainings, and also important to clean this because this is where our new parts will go. Try not to breathe because this dust is not so nice. It's not that dangerous. I googled it. They used to use asbestos in brakes back in the past. That was dangerous. So it's not that bad, but still try not to breathe in all this rubbish. Also good practice to apply some copper grease on this end, in case in the future when you have to remove the brake rotor, brake disc. It doesn't get stuck. On some cars, you know, if they're not used too much, they get rusty, they get sticky, and then people struggle to remove. Not too much, so it doesn't get splashed around, not onto your brakes. Just about that. Now we get our new disc. Sometimes they come in a little plastic bag covered with oil, so they don't get rusty. In that case, you need a spray can and a brake and clutch cleaner. They sold widely in all part shops, Halfords, whatever. You just spray it to degrease it. Sometimes they are painted, like in our case here, so to prevent from rust. So we don't really need to clean. It's always nice to clean it. So this stuff I'm talking about, I'm not advertising particular brand. It's just anything, and then you. So make sure there is no grease on the brakes. So now we just slide this in. I quite like this car now, because we don't have the hassle to remove bracket. So once it's in, sometimes some variants can have little bolt here that holds discs in place. In general, disc is held by the wheel, so once you tighten your wheel, your brake disc as well is tightened properly. Sometimes there is a little tiny bolt here to hold the disc in place. So this little thing is called brake piston, brake caliper with a piston. So the way it works, when you push your brakes, maybe you know it, but I'm just explaining everything from scratch. Brake fluid comes into here and then pushes piston out. So this caliper squeezes the pistons. So when as the disc and parts wear out, this space decreases. So if we put new parts here, it simply won't fit. So we need to push this piston back. And because we have cable with a handbrake, if it's a manual handbrake, not electronic one, we also need, together with pushing this piston in, we need to turn it. For that reason, we use special tool. I bought this set on eBay. I'll leave the link in description to give you variety. Not particular seller, it's just they are quite common. They're not that expensive. They can. So what we're gonna use this. There is one with a normal thread and another one with the opposite thread. They all use normal thread. On both sides, you need to turn it clockwise and push it in. So this is how it works. We choose adapter that, as you can see, there's two little grooves here, so, and two sticking out pins, so something that fits these grooves. So we put this adapter here, and then make sure it sits nicely in. Then we can turn this middle bit out a little bit, and then slowly but surely start turning it together with pushing it. This rubber protection sometimes can be twisted. Make sure it doesn't get caught here and it doesn't go over the limit. But you keep pressing it and turning it as far as it goes. As you get to the end, you just simply feel that it doesn't go any further. Because all this situation is tight now, what we can do, use a spanner, 22mm, and simply turn this to loosen it. One more thing, with the calipers, with the cable handbrake, what you also need to do to give some space for the handbrake, you need to turn it back something between quarter of the turn and half of the turn, maybe about quarter of the turn. Now we insert new, make sure it's all sits happy, insert new springs, and the top one just the way it was, so it sits in the grooves. These springs prevent brake pads from knocking, you know, when your caliper squeezes brakes, so they don't knock onto the bracket, so it's all nice and smooth. Simply insert brake. It can be a bit tight, but then push it in. And another one with the same from the other side. Same story. With a bit of fiddle, you push it in properly. One more thing that I normally do, that you don't really have to do, but it's good practice. Remove these pins. There is a rubber sleeve. I'll show you how it works. You take it off. So these pins need to move freely. So the caliper needs to move on these pins. So it needs to squeeze brakes, take it out. So as it wear out, it changes its position a little bit. So these pins needs to be clean and lubricated. So I normally, every time I do it, I clean it and lubricate with the grease that holds the temperature. I'm not saying it's any particular grease, because you just look in your car part shop and then put it back in so it gets lubricated, and sleeve pops onto this edge like that, and do the same to the bottom one. Now we can put caliper back on. You can push these pins in a little bit so they match, so they put it. Make sure that your brake line is not twisted. There are little grooves alongside, so you can see that you accidentally twist it either way. Probably you shouldn't twist it with this cable, because it's all attached here. In some cases there is just brake line, so make sure it's all straight, it's not twisted, and don't apply pressure on this. Don't hang your caliper on it. I mentioned that before. Now we take our new fresh little bolts, put them in, and same story as we were undoing it, same as the bottom one. We used 15mm spanner to counter hold it, and then 13mm to put it in. One more thing, as it gets tight, sometimes size of these little nuts here is a little bit smaller than a spanner. I get that on my VW, so just make sure you hold it, prevent it from spinning. Maybe don't push it too much in, so once it gets tight you can take it out, and once it catches here, when it gets tight here, then you can finish it. So with the bottom bolt in, this one is tight already. Once it gets tight here, you don't need to counter hold, and same with the bottom bolt. Like for example, it's now it's spinning. I'll just hold it slightly, till it gets a little bit more tight. Not enough yet. There we go. Now you don't have to counter hold it, and tighten it up, and this is the torque value for that. Pushing this handbrake back in, make sure this bit gets in properly, push it in back. Sometimes you can take this out of bracket here, but put it in, and then put this cable in and let it catch with the handbrake lever. That's it. Now, before you go anywhere, get inside the car, close the brake fluid tank properly, close the bonnet, and before you go anywhere, press the brake pedal a few times to pump up brake fluid into your calipers, otherwise your real brakes won't work. So you pump it up your brakes, just press brake pedal a few times, and that's it. Off you go. Thank you for watching. in the description I've got link to my website and all other useful links.